Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me in this live stream today. So, as usual, I invite you to participate, share your thoughts, questions, or your, any ideas you might be having about the subject in a live chat box, so that you can participate in the creation of this content. So, perfectionism. I think that perfectionism generally has this negative connotation about perhaps causing lots of problems for us. So we strive towards this state where something is flawless, where maybe we are flawless. And in particular, in relation to this self-concept, I think perfectionism can be quite limiting, because if we strive to be this perfect person, right, we have to put a lot of effort into that perfection. But is it even possible? Is it even possible to achieve this flawless state where we are someone that has no weaknesses, no doesn't do any mistakes, or doesn't do anything that is not aligned with this ideal of perfection? Adding to this complexity, is it possible to even become this perfect person, considering that perfectionism in general is a kind of subjective point of view, right? So what I consider as being perfect, so having no flaws, having no errors, having no weaknesses, whatever you might want to decide what it is, what I might consider as perfect, the other person will consider as not being perfect, right? And then on the top of that, when we are on this path of perfectionist, right, we start looking for flaws to fix. So it's like a never-ending process, because you can always find flaws in something. You can always find weaknesses. You can always find something that is not right, depending on your mood, depending on your perspective, depending on what you are aware of right now. Having said all that, there is also a very positive path of perfectionism, which I'm going to try to explore in this live stream today. So, perfectionism as a drive, as I was explaining, kind of leads us to this motivation or drive to have something as flawless as possible. So it could be ourselves, could be a particular thing in question. Having this drive obviously is motivating for many people who are perfectionists, for example, right? It's an energy, right? So you want to have something perfect. You want to be perfect in the first place. So on this fundamental level, I don't think there is anything wrong with that, because it is a drive. So the question here in this live stream that I will try to answer is how to convert this unhealthy perfectionist that can lead us to low self-esteem, to procrastination, right? Because we strive towards this perfection, to a point where we feel stuck, where we can't move anymore, right? Because how much can you try to improve something, right? Eventually you need to let go, right? So again, the question of this live stream is how to transform this unhealthy form of perfectionism, which can be very limiting, to this a drive towards perhaps excellence, or something that is good quality, or even us being maybe brilliant or good in what we do, right? Or just, becoming closer to an ideal, to who we imagine ourselves to be. Right. Just looking at the comment box. Yes, hey guys, hey Adrian, hey Baron, hi Andrea. So to start with, I think it would be worth to start distinguishing between what is healthy, a form of perfectionism, what is unhealthy, right? So unhealthy, we know it's limiting, right? Why is it limiting? Because when let's say we have an idea of who we should be, right? An idea of a perfect person. So I want to be productive. I want to maybe complete projects on time. I want to always be, maybe nice or kind to other people, right? So we all have this kind of ideals in terms of what would be a kind of perfect state for us, right? An ideal self. And most people strive towards these ideals. And I think it's good because that's how we improve, that's how we learn, that's how we move forward, right? That's how we expand, because we strive towards some sort of an ideal. The problem with perfectionism for many people, and why it's limiting, is because we are never good enough. We start to, we get so immersed on this journey, often unconscious journey of striving towards this perfectionism, that we kind of forget, or maybe limit our perspective to what is. So it's like being on a treadmill, essentially, where we constantly strive, but nothing is ever good enough, and we are not good enough in that case. So I think this can be kind of associated with this idea of inner critic, right? So each time we deviate from this path of perfectionism, boom, our inner critic kicks in, and then, for many people that's quite a trip. Then you start saying to yourself that, okay, I'm not good enough, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm doing this wrong, I'm doing everything wrong, right? And then, of course, that's gonna create lots of unpleasant feelings like, shame or anxiety or sadness, feeling like we need to withdraw from the world because we are not this perfect individual that we imagined ourselves to be, or at least we deviate from this path. So with this unhealthy form of perfectionism, it's that innate kind of pressure to be this specific individual. And very often, as I mentioned, it is an unconscious drive. It is something like an unconscious mechanism that we probably developed as a result of our interactions with our parents, for example. If your parents were, very demanding, or they didn't offer as much support or appreciation as you needed, right? You're going to start associating, you're going to start thinking as a child that, okay, I have to become more, I have to be more, I have to strive towards this, whatever perfect state we imagine ourselves to be in that situation, to get approval, to get attention from our parents. That's how often we start on this journey of unhealthy perfectionism, which then later in life translates to, feeling that, we are not good enough, that we don't have what it takes to succeed, for example, or to take up a new job or face challenges, right? We don't accept ourselves the way we are because we have this ideal image of who we should be, which is rarely fully defined because, as I was saying, very often it's a very unconscious process, right? That manifests itself in this pressure to conform to this inner criticism that we might be having about ourselves, so that we have to keep striving. And then obviously in practical terms, I think it manifests in things like procrastination, right? Let's say you work on a project and you have this pressure to be perfect in the back of your mind, right? You keep working, and no matter what you do, it's never good enough, right? So just as with the self-concept, it manifests externally. So what happens is, for someone with perfectionism, I think it's very common to not complete projects in the first place. So we start many different things, right? But nothing ever gets done because it's not perfect, right? Or we might start procrastinating, as I mentioned. So we start avoiding doing certain things because it's too challenging. We don't want to engage in various projects, for example, because of our past experiences where we did try to be perfect, to do things perfectly, but we failed, right? So we start procrastinating, often unconsciously associating that we're gonna fail, that no matter what we do, it's not gonna be good enough, right? So these are sort of things that can manifest in our life when we are driven by this perfectionism. Inner critic, that dude gotta go. He can ruin my whole day sometimes. Yes, exactly. And I think that inner critic is exactly associated very often, let's say, maybe not always, associated with this perfectionism, because it's like this manifestation of pushing us towards this ideal, right? But at the same time, when we are not accomplishing, while we are not doing, where we are deviating from this path of perfectionism, we're gonna get punished from that inner critic. So at the root cause, at the very root, I think, in terms of like inner criticism and punishing ourselves and beating ourselves from not succeeding, perhaps it's not the inner critic itself, but maybe holding these ideals, maybe expecting from ourselves this kind of perfection. So I see the very relevant question from Baron. How does someone define and maintain a healthy relationship with the inner critic? So as I've just said, I think very often at the very root of inner criticism is having these ideals, having this kind of expectations of ourselves to be perfect, right? To do things perfectly. So very often I would say it kind of connects with this unrealistic standards or expectations that we cannot meet. So no matter what we do, right, we have the ideal, we have this pressure for perfection, but no matter what we do, we're not getting that. So what happens is, again, we start criticizing, punishing ourselves. So how do we develop the healthy relationship with the inner critic? Well, first of all, it comes down to kind of standards and expectations for ourselves. But it's all about kind of digging deeper. Why is the inner critic there in the first place, right? Is it useful? What does it want you to do? So in terms of perfectionism, if you identify as someone with this strong drive towards perfection, it's perhaps related to these ideals of perfectionism that we might be having. So we're going to go into that later on during the live stream. So I've kind of started defining this perfectionist from more negative side, right? Do you guys think, is there anything else you would like to add to this definition? Is there any other perhaps consequences in your life that you see that are the result of this perfectionism or this pressure to be perfect or do things perfectly? I'm really looking forward to your thoughts and just to see if there's anything else we missed. And I'm pretty sure that your experiences will be very unique. So I'm really looking forward for your perspective to contribute to this whole content. Another thing that came to my mind about perfectionism is I think with perfectionism, very often it's like this hyper focus on what is wrong. So what are the flaws, right? What is not working? What we are doing wrong, right? What doesn't conform to our ideal? What doesn't conform to our expectations? So is this like with the unhealthy perfectionist is the super hyper focus on what is not working, what is wrong, basically. So isn't it closely associated with a false self that needs to be so spectacular because the true self feels helpless, ETI said. I'm pretty sure it's going to be very subjective, so it depends on the person probably, where this perfectionism is coming from. But in terms of your question, ETI, I think yes, perfectionist could be this part of the defense mechanism to protect the vulnerable part of ourselves. So if we only be perfect, if we only reach these ideals, if we only, do everything perfectly, whatever that means, see how actually vague that sounds. If we only did that, we're not going to be vulnerable, we're not going to be helpless, we're not going to experience unpleasant emotions. But is it really true? Is it really about avoiding these emotions, or is it actually kind of being a slave to the inner critic, to that pressure to conform? So it's like a never-ending loop in a sense, where we try to avoid unpleasant feelings, which actually come to us, which we experience as a result of being punished by the inner critic. Which one wants us to be perfect? Which wants us to strive towards perfection? So then it's like, you see here, like it's a never-ending loop. So you want to avoid the feelings, but then if you stop avoiding these feelings, there will be a pressure to be perfect. So then you start being perfect, but that's not good enough, of course, right? Even perfect is not good enough in that case. You start experiencing this feeling. So you start pressuring yourself even more and more to be that great person. And it doesn't even have to be such spectacular scenario. It doesn't have to be. It could be about little things in your life. It could be about your social skills. It could be about your maybe public speaking or your career, right? Little things in life. So I think in terms of that unhealthy criticism, again, it manifests like being hypercritical of ourselves, other people. Again, hyper-focus on flaws. What is wrong? What is not working right? What am I doing wrong? So what is not fitting into the ideal that I might be having for ourselves? But then I think the important question that just popped into my mind is that when we start thinking about these ideals, right? When we start thinking about this perfect, spectacular self, really like that word, spectacular. I think it really resonates here. Can we really define that ideal in the first place? Can we really define perfection? So I think it's something to think about. And I think very often with perfectionism, it could be also manifesting like, it's kind of obvious, but like I was saying, like it's very often to experience, oh, nothing is good enough. I'm not good enough. People around me not good enough. So I can be very judgmental and punitive towards them as well. But I think like, and I'm not sure if you guys are gonna like it, but it can manifest in a way like we are not very grateful for what we have, in a sense. So we can be very demanding, even though it can be an unconscious process. So we are not, we constantly want more. We constantly want things to be the way we want them to be, even if it's a little project. And again, it might sound like I'm exaggerating and I'm, only describing these very extreme cases of perfectionism, but I think it's simply a spectrum, right? So it doesn't have to manifest that strongly for every person. It could be in little things. It could be like struggling with self-acceptance, struggling with moving forward, maybe being a little bit lazy at times or procrastinating because we are not doing the things that we expected ourselves to be. So again, it's a spectrum. So I think that okay, so I can see that there are some conversations going on in the chat box, and it's going to be very difficult for me to go through all that. So if you have a specific question, can you just use my name? I think all you need to do is type @Mind Mastery, or just use the super chat feature. So that way I can see your question and I can actually answer it. Or if you want me to just read out your thoughts, contribute to the discussion, I'll be very happy. But please somehow make it visible. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult for me to see. Okay, so we have this definition of the unhealthy perfectionism. Now the question is, can there be healthy perfectionism? Can we channel this drive towards excellence, towards perfection, towards doing things right into this healthier form which can serve us? So instead of being at the mercy of this unconscious pressure, unconscious drive to be perfect, to be that ideal person. So like it doesn't have to manifest as being perfect, or I need to be perfect, but it could be anything. It could be I have to be a good person, I have to be a kind person, I have to be real good at computers. So whatever you can think about, right? All these ideas are very often related to perfectionism. So in that cases, we are at the mercy of this drive. We feel like we are being pressured, right? It's rarely that we choose. It's rarely that we choose to strive towards something perfect. So I think the first thing that distinguishes the unhealthy from the healthy form of perfectionism is that with the healthy form, we choose. We choose to strive towards some ideals. But at the same time, we have realistic expectations. We have this realistic perspective on what we are, what we can do. So you see here, it's like kind of harnessing the energy, harnessing the drive and motivation towards something that we choose. And I think choice here needs to be emphasized. With unhealthy perfectionism, it's rarely that we choose, right? The inner critic comes in, the pressure to conform to these ideas comes in, and we feel like, oh, we have to do this. We have to continuously improve a project. We continuously have to read about personal development. We continuously have to try to improve ourselves, analyze ourselves, find out what is wrong, right? It's like a little bit compulsive at times, I think, as well. Whereas with a healthy perfectionism, it's all about choosing your ideals, defining these ideals for yourself, and choosing how you want to strive to them. But at the same time, being able to let go of things that you're not able to achieve, or if it's too much for you. So it's kind of about developing this realistic perspective on what could be perfection, what you could accomplish, and you choose this path. But of course, there's way much more to this whole concept. And I think the first step in defining that and kind of disentangling yourself from this unconscious pressure to always be perfect, and disentangling yourself from attributing external things to your self-worth. So if you're not doing something, then you're not good enough. Is defining what is good enough, what is excellent, and what is perfect. So if you start with defining this and developing actual criteria for what is good enough, what is excellent, and what is perfect, you're going to start seeing that maybe perfect, in some situations, maybe it is achievable. But in many situations, perhaps you will notice that maybe it's difficult to define perfect in the first place. Baron asks, when does criticizing become problematic to well-being and a realistic worldview? Can it never be detrimental? Well, I think that with the inner critic, it's all about that the reason why it can be toxic is because it doesn't help us to improve. It rarely helps us to improve. Inner critic is all about punishment. So if you make a mistake, if you embarrass yourself for example, in a social situation, right? The inner critic doesn't come in with solutions on how to improve, but it's all about punishment. So ask yourself, is it actually helpful in any way? And what is the effect on your well-being in this process of punishing yourself, calling yourself names, telling yourself how badly you did in certain situations? Max asks, are you planning on speaking about this barrier of not getting started when being perfectionistic? Yeah, the plan is, which I should have probably shared in the beginning of this live stream, is I first want to draw the distinction between the healthy and unhealthy perfectionism, and then I will try to come up with some strategies on how to disentangle yourself from the unhealthy form, from this toxic one. So hopefully it is going to be relevant to this idea of a barrier of not getting started. I think, this barrier, I think, is just one of the manifestations, but hopefully you will find it relevant. So, okay, so what else can contribute to a healthy perfectionism? I think with healthy perfectionism, it's like an admiration of something that is excellent in itself, something that is brilliant, something that perhaps is maybe even beautiful in some ways. So with healthy perfectionism is, as you can see, we switch from focusing on what is wrong to focusing on what is right. So with the unhealthy perfectionism, again, hyper focus on the flaws. Whereas with healthy perfectionism, we start seeing the perfection that exists already. Perhaps the secret order, the internal beauty of things outside of ourselves, or even within ourselves, right? So we focus on strengths. We focus on the kind of internal order or the system that already exists within ourselves or within other people or externally in the world in general. So if you imagine someone who is perfectionistic, but it's a healthy form of perfection, I think it's like appreciating the perfection that already exists, rather than forcing something unnatural, something that perhaps cannot even exist in the real life, right? So again, I think there's this critical distinction between unhealthy one and healthy one, with the unhealthy one focusing solely on what is wrong, right? Now, if you imagine that a particular image that comes to my mind, it's someone who tries to draw a perfect circle on a piece of paper, right? So the unhealthy perfectionist will probably do several different attempts trying to get that perfect circle on the paper, whereas the healthy one will maybe do one or two, maybe three tops, just an example, and they're going to start appreciating the already existing perfection. So it's like trying to see the perfection that already exists, trying to see the excellence that already exists, rather than focusing only on what is wrong. So with a healthy perfectionist, you might ask, then how do you improve? How do you get to perfection, for example? Well, I think that with a healthy one, it's a state. So it's a state that you appreciate already, right? And you focus on the journey rather than the destination, because you know that there are only limited things that you can improve. You know that the perfect state actually probably doesn't even exist, because it's very subjective. So if I look at the circle on a piece of paper, right? From my perspective, there might be 5 flaws. There might be 5 things that could be improved. From your perspective, there might be 10 different things that could be improved about this circle, right? Depending on what you focus. So you see here, like, the perfection itself is very relativistic, very dependent on our perspective and what we focus on. So since it is dependent on what we focus on, we can choose to focus on what is completely wrong, focus only on flaws, or we can choose to at least develop more balanced perspective where we focus on both what is right and what is wrong with us and with a person in front of us or with a world around us. So it's all about choosing and developing more accurate perspective on what is. So another, as well as we've been talking about the inner critic, I think that another component of this healthy perfectionism is there's no inner critic, but it's more like having a sort of inner coach within us, so that when we do want to improve something, when we do want to maybe, become excellent in something or develop a particular project or skill, right? The inner critic will be punishing us, will be constantly pointing out, okay, this is wrong, I'm such a bad person, right? Whatever, however it manifests for you. But I think with a healthy perfectionist, with a tamed perfectionism that you own, it's more about having this kind of inner coach voice within you that focuses on what can be improved and how it can be improved. So let's say that I wrote an article, right? And I'm a perfectionist. So I want to have this article as perfect as I can. With an unhealthy perfectionist, I will see like, okay, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. This could be improved, perhaps this could be improved. Maybe I'm a bad writer, maybe I should quit writing, right? That's usually how it goes. And then probably I'm going to start procrastinating on writing articles in the future because it's so difficult. It takes so much effort, right? With a healthy perfectionist, instead of going through that trip on punishing myself for all the mistakes, I'll be like, okay, this could be improved, and this is how I will improve it. This is how I can improve it. So it's like shifting your mindset a little bit from problems onto solutions, where you start encouraging yourself to fix certain things or to even learn from mistakes. So it's okay acknowledging there is a mistake. I could improve certain things in that article, but I'm also, I'm not punishing myself for making that mistake, but I try to see the solution. I try to see the way forward. And adding to all that, again, it comes to kind of developing this realistic perspective on what is good enough. I think very often with perfectionism, we did mention how it could stop us from doing things because we are afraid we are not maybe gonna do it perfect, or it's not gonna be good enough. But I think there's another alternative point, and I think it could drive us towards and having like an obsession or a compulsion where we constantly try to make something perfect. Use the same example, working on that article, where we don't know when to let go. So it's like we're getting stuck in a loop. And that's why we probably never finish projects, or it's so difficult to finish projects, because we never know when something is good enough. So if we don't know when something is good enough, because we only see the perfection in front of us as a goal of that project, we will not know when to let go. So with healthy perfectionism, of course, you have this drive to do it as perfect as you can, realistically, right? But you know when to let go. So the question for you is, how would you know when to let go? How would you know when something is good enough? That's the question for you. Very interesting comment from Max. I don't understand your healthy and unhealthy distinction. If parts of your circle are ugly and parts are fine, then this makes the circle still ugly, doesn't it? Very interesting. So I think this comment illustrates the perfectionist, the unhealthy perfectionism at its core. You focus you're seeing only the ugly in that circle, right? So because you're very driven towards this perfection, you see only the ugly. And regardless of how many parts of that circle is going to be good, you don't see it because you focus only on the ugly, which makes the whole circle ugly. Right? That is the unhealthy perfectionist. You only focus on what is wrong. Only what is ugly about that picture, for example. The healthy perfectionist is seeing both, right? And appreciating the good, the perfect, or the excellent, or even the good enough. So the question is, let's say that the circle is half flawed and half beautiful, right? Okay, it's not perfect. Are you able to, does it perform the function? Does it illustrate the circle? Does it already have a function that it performs? Or are you still driven to make it perfect for whatever reason, because you can feel better about yourself? So this is the distinction between healthy and unhealthy. The unhealthy is, it's never good enough. Like, I'm going to draw the circle with 90% perfection, or it's 90% beautiful and 1% ugly because my hand may be shaken a little bit. And you're still going to focus on how imperfect that is. Even though I just wanted to draw the circle to show someone a just circle on a piece of paper. So That's the unhealthy perfectionism. It's never good enough, no matter how much effort. Baron says, I have found that seeing myself grow is a good measure of good enough. Are there any more that are generally noticeable? So seeing progress is good enough. Exactly. So I think this is a good point, because good enough is when you see that it moved from the state A to the state B, right? So it performs its function. I personally like to use this definition that something is good enough when it performs its function. If it performs its function, it's good enough. But of course, I have a bunch of perfectionists in my chat box. So, in my opinion, channeling this unhealthy drive or general drive towards perfectionism, towards striving towards excellence, I think it's a great way of using that energy, using that motivation, using this drive towards, striving towards perfection, which is not unhealthy. So good enough is, in my opinion, it's like having these basic standards, right? So when something is good enough, okay, I'm able to let it go. I'm able to let go of that project. I'm able to let go of maybe writing that book, whatever you're doing, right? Whereas with the drive towards perfectionism, you want to strive towards excellence. So something that will be, brilliant in itself, or more than average, or more than good enough. So even though it kind of performs its function, right, you want a little bit more. But at the same time, with healthy perfectionism, you also don't lose sight of something that is good enough. Someone who is, obsessively oriented towards perfectionism, the unhealthy form, the unhealthy drive, the often unconscious one, there's rarely any consideration of something being good enough. Because if you settle for good enough, you're going to get punished from your inner critic, right? So with this unhealthy form of perfectionism, that's why it's limiting. That's why you don't finish projects. That's why you struggle to start projects, because you might be scared of failure. You might be scared of not doing things good enough accordingly to the standards of perfectionism, not standards that are realistic. And essentially, on a very basic level, there's some conditioning going on, because if you fail, if you're not perfect, your inner critic kicks in. So with a healthy perfectionist is defining this, what is good enough, what is excellent, and what is perfect. And perhaps in that case, you could define for yourself the perfect as a combination of good enough and excellent, so that you do something to the best of your ability, but you are also able to let it go when necessary, without punishing yourself, without feeling regrets, without feeling bad about yourself or about your skills. Thank you, ETI. It means a lot. Thank you. So it's all about channeling this energy, this drive towards perfection, towards what we can do, towards what is realistic, towards what is good enough or excellent, without maybe identifying ourselves with the results. And I think that component is also quite significant in perfectionism, because with unhealthy perfectionism in general, as I was explaining, we often feel that we are not good enough, that we can't, we can't achieve this perfection, even though it's unrealistic, right? But very often there's this component that we identify with all the results of our actions. So that's why the inner critic kicks in, right? Because when we make a mistake externally, right, we are not focusing on that mistake or how to fix it, just like with the inner coach you would do, which you would, you'd find a solution and try to do it better next time and learn from mistakes. With unhealthy perfectionists, it's kind of very personal, right? So when you're not achieving that perfection, when you are deviating from the path of perfectionism, it's like making it very personal, making it about all our person, right? So it's all us. If we fail at, maybe we publish an article with a typo, right? For a perfectionist, that's a disaster, right? We can't write anymore. We're not good enough. I don't want to write that articles anymore in the future, right? I don't want to be a writer, right? Very often these thoughts, regardless how true or not true might be for you, but I think very often it's quite common to have these thoughts, right? And start feeling like we are not good enough. With a healthy form of perfectionism, if we kind of, again, channel this drive towards more realistic, it's kind of detaching ourselves from the results of our actions. So, of course, what we do in the external world kind of defines ourselves and supports our identity and self-concept. But at the same time, when we make a mistake, it's not about the totality of our person, right? If I publish an article with a typo, right? I could say, okay, I'm a bad writer, I'm not going to write anymore. Or I could say, okay, I wasn't paying as much attention. Next time, I'm going to run the article through an extra layer of spell checking, let's say. Or I'm going to ask someone to proofread it for me, right? So I focus on what I can do. So whilst I'm still striving towards this excellence, I don't want to call it perfectionist anymore. Although you might want to call it perfectionist. Why not? But I'm realistic about the process, and I don't identify myself with the results of the action. It's more about the process. Trying to channel our attention and energy into this process of doing something well, right? Focusing on the process, on how we are doing things. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, actually doing so can improve our chances of getting to that ideal state, getting that ideal result if we wanted to. But again, we need to be able to detach ourselves from our mistakes. That's a good idea, Adrian shared. Maybe it's a good idea to create an agreement with oneself before starting a project, a well-defined agreement that sets limits. Right. So you could take it, we could kind of expand on this and say, like, here's the formula, here are the criteria. So what is good enough? When is my project going to be ready? Right? This is the good enough, right? Ready means, let's say I wrote an article. Even if it's a draft, it's good enough because I already passed my information, right? It already performs its function. I wanted to express my thoughts, express my ideas. That's good enough. And then what is excellent, right? So maybe no typos, maybe having a specific criteria for which ideas needs to be emphasized, for example, or the layer of the article, right? And then perfect, can you really define perfect? How would perfect look like? That would be the same like excellent, probably. So having this criteria, I think, is a great idea. Great idea, so that you know when to let go, when you need to let go, and also kind of paying attention to, okay, so whatever happens with that article, there's a great opportunity for learning, because even if I made some mistakes, even if that article is not flawless, there's a great opportunity for learning. And how satisfying that would be for my drive for perfectionism, right? If I want to strive towards perfection, if anything at all, I want to focus on learning from mistakes. I want to actually keep making these mistakes so I can improve, so I can learn what am I doing right, what could be improved. So I can learn about solutions to the problems I might not be aware of if I only focus on being perfect. If you're only perfect, if you only try to do everything flawlessly, that's going to be hard to learn, because each time you make a mistake, you're going to punish yourself for not being perfect. Whereas if you're taking this more relaxed approach to perfectionism and say like, yeah, okay, I want to be perfect, but realize that the path towards perfection is actually through learning and expanding and making these mistakes. You're gonna want making these mistakes. You're gonna keep wanting to, do this, make these mistakes anytime it's possible. So through, challenging yourself, stepping outside your comfort zone, because these mistakes are actually a path towards perfectionism if you really want to stick on this path towards excellence. So, and I think that with the healthy perfectionism, as I was saying on the kind of beginning of the video, it's also about shifting your focus onto what is right. So if you keep focusing on your strength, for example, or on your skills, on your accomplishments, on your abilities. So for example, how did you solve certain problems in the past? How did you accomplish what you have right now in your life? If you focus on this, that is a key distinction from the unhealthy form of perfectionist. Because with the unhealthy one, you focus on mistakes, right? I did this wrong, I failed my exam, I published an article with a typo, right? You start creating all this list of things that you did wrong. With healthy perfectionism, you start with listing what you actually can do. So it's not about ignoring the faults, because as I was saying, if you really want to be on this path of perfectionism, it's actually welcoming your faults and welcoming making mistakes so that you can learn and expand, right? But you need to have a base. You need to have, a kind of inner security that you have the skills and abilities to face these challenges, to learn. So you need to be able to have this kind of balanced point of view, balanced perspective on yourself, other people, what you do, your skills, and so on. Because if you don't, again, it's going to be unbiased, very biased. If you focus just on what is right, you're going to be ignoring all the mistakes and opportunities for learning. If you focus only on what is wrong, right, you're going to be beating yourself up for not being the ideal self or being perfect. You're going to be punishing yourself through this inner criticism. So it's all about kind of developing this more balanced point of view of what is right, what is wrong. Okay, I have the skill. That's how I solved the problem in the past. So I have the ability to solve these problems, right? And here's the problem that I need to solve. Here's the mistake I need to correct if I do want to improve, and if I'm really serious about perfectionism. Because maybe you're not serious about perfectionism. Maybe it's it's an automated pattern in your mind, on your emotional level, in your thoughts, in your behavior, that you strive towards perfectionism. But once you start reflecting on it consciously, it's like, actually, I don't really care about perfectionism, right? Once you start making the whole process conscious of where your drive towards perfection is coming from, what you're trying to accomplish with perfection. Once you start reflecting, that's going to give you an opportunity to start owning your perfectionism, or disentangling yourself from this path of perfectionism altogether. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no perfect path in life. Some people want to strive towards this excellence and perfection. Other people don't care. They just settle for good enough, which is also good enough because it performs your function, right? It enables you to live, to move forward in life. So that's something to reflect too, is, are you really serious about perfectionism? Do you really want to be perfect? Do you really want to put your time and effort and energy into creating things that are perfect? Do you really want to put your time and energy into improving yourself, or finding things that you could expand on, or develop your skills, or correct mistakes? right? So if you don't, but you are still unconsciously having some, maybe a little compulsion to do things perfectly, then you are not really owning this path, not really owning this drive, but you are being led by some unconscious schema that possibly comes from your childhood, that if you're not doing things in this specific way, you're going to be punished, which you probably will be punished by your own inner critic. But in a general sense, it's not valid anymore. It's an ancient mechanism. Thank you so much, Baron. Thank you for your support. So, yes, Baron, it went through. Again, thank you so much for your support. So, just one second, I'm just double checking the notes if there's anything. Right, so owning the perfectionist, I think a very, very helpful exercise in taming down this unrealistic form of perfectionist could be simple gratitude or appreciation exercise. So what do you appreciate about yourself, about other people, about your skills, about the world in general, anything about your situation? You know, pick and name it. And if you start doing it regularly, you start noticing that, okay, you're not perfect, but there are actually things outside this ideal self that maybe they don't fit in this ideal. Maybe they don't fit in the criteria of the perfect, but they are good enough or maybe excellent in themselves that you can appreciate. So it's kind of loosening up this idea of that you have to be perfect or things have to be perfect, and otherwise things are going to be very bad for you, end up very bad for you, or you're going to lose control. Which actually leads me, that's quite an interesting idea I really forgot to mention about. I think very often with perfectionists is our attempt to control things. So we want to have control. If things are not perfect, we might be worried that we're going to lose that control. Especially with the unhealthy form of perfectionism. It's this attempt to control who we are, what we do. But most importantly, I think, it's like an attempt to control how other people react to us. So if we only get perfect, right, we control other people's reactions, because then they will like us, then they will appreciate us, then they will not criticize us or reject us. So if we only be perfect, if we only do these things perfectly, we can avoid being rejected or criticized or punished. So with the healthy form of perfectionist, again, it's kind of loosening this mechanism out completely. So obviously you want to control things. I mean, I think that's part of being human. We want to have some control, at least something, right? We want to maybe organize our environment to some extent, or have a control to pick what we're gonna do this day or tomorrow or next month, right? But I think with a healthy perfectionism, it's like, okay, you control what you have or what you can, so you control the process. You can control the process, right? When you're writing an article, it's about controlling the process. So you want to master writing an article, for example. It's not about controlling how other people react to that article, but it's about controlling the process and what you can, but at the same time making the room for things that you cannot control. So making the room for unexpected. But then how do you know? How do you know if you are driven to control the process because you want to get that thing simply for the sake of appreciating excellence, appreciating, order or system, or whether you're driven to control this process because you want to avoid rejection or disapproval from other people? And I think it takes some exploration to do lots of self-honesty, where you start exploring your actual emotions and feelings in relation to being perfect or not being perfect. So especially when you do make mistakes, when you do something that is not ideal, that you didn't want to happen, what sort of feelings and emotions come up? Are you very punitive towards yourself in this sort of situations? If yes, obviously there's much work to do to disentangle yourself from this inner criticism and standards. And I think the first step, really good step that you could start disentangling yourself from this unhealthy criticism is actually this kind of gratitude or appreciation exercise. So take, 5 minutes a day, every day, to list, 3 things that you are grateful for about your situation, about yourself, about the external world, anything really. So that's going to start, helping you to shift the focus from focusing on what is wrong with you to what is also right with you. So developing more balanced perspective. And I know it sounds easy, but it's all about, having this courage to let go of that control of reaction of other people and explore the process. So what would happen if, you didn't control the process at all? What would happen if you immerse yourself just in the experience of creation of something without a plan? Let's say you just sit down and write an article, or you just, you don't dress up well and you go out to the store, right? Let's say you care about your appearance. What would happen then? And exposing yourself to this sort of situations that are completely opposite to your drive towards perfectionism can slowly make you more and more comfortable with the imperfection, with the whole flows within yourself. So in that way you can, expand a little bit, because with unhealthy perfectionism, it's all about this tunnel vision that you only have to be this particular person, right? So the logic says that we need to loosen it up. We have to expand. We have to go outside of this criteria and definitions we might be having for ourselves and start getting comfortable with the imperfection. So going against the inner critic, going against that pressure. Could you do a video live stream about how to let go in general, how to let go of being comfortable with uncertainty? Max asks. Yeah, that's a really good idea. I'll put it on my list, and I'll do my best to do either video or live stream. We'll see. I have to explore the subject first and see if there's enough material for the whole live stream. So I think these are most important key points I wanted to express about transforming this unhealthy perfectionism into this healthy form of perfectionism. So if I could kind of summarize, it's all about, appreciating your already existing skills. Or appreciating what is right with a picture, for example, with your project, with an article that you wrote, and then focusing on what could be improved. So it's all about wanting to improve, wanting to learn from mistakes, not closing yourself to this little box of how perfect you need to be, or attaching yourself to an idea that, okay, I'm only a good person, right? So I'm a perfect good person. So each time I do something that deviates from this self-concept, I'm going to punish myself. I'm going to experience, maybe discomfort or sadness or anxiety because it's not perfect. And I'm going to push it to the shadow. So expanding your perspective on who you are, on people around you, right? Developing this more balanced viewpoint in terms of what is right and what is wrong, and not focusing only what is wrong, only what is flawed, right? And then, as we were talking, it's also about developing this realistic criteria for what is good enough. So having a concept, having a criteria, actual criteria for understanding what is good enough will enable you to let go of things. With perfectionism, we often, get stuck in a loop, have to continuously improve something. I have to improve myself, I have to improve my skill, I have to improve my project. But if you have that definition of what is good enough for you, in terms of, maybe yourself or your skill or your project, you always have this exit strategy. So if you don't work on the project anymore, if it consumes too much time, too much energy, you have an exit. You say, okay, that's it, that's good enough, okay? It performs its function, I can let it go. And then if you really want to stick on the path of perfectionism, then defining the criteria for the excellent. But again, the excellent will be a little bit limited. It will be very subjective. So excellent is based on learning from your mistakes, learning from your past experiences where you perhaps did something wrong, or past mistakes that you do want to correct in the future, or simply problems that you want to solve. But with a healthy perfectionism is about developing this kind of voice of an inner coach. So encouraging yourself to learn from mistakes, to find solutions to different problems, right? It's not about punishing yourself as with the unhealthy criticism. So I think these are the simplest things we could start doing to move ourselves toward this path of perfectionism. But most importantly, as I was saying, very often the drive towards perfection, the unhealthy perfection, is very often unconscious for many of us. It's like a little prison, a tyranny, that we have to be perfect to control reactions, to control how other people react to us, right? We have to control who we are so that we don't expose ourselves, so that we are not vulnerable, so that we can avoid criticism perhaps. But once we start exploring and seeing that it's not the path that we have chosen for ourselves, many of us might be like, I don't want to be perfect anymore, right? I don't want to strive towards excellence or perfection. I just want to settle for good enough and just enjoy a peaceful life. So that's something to keep in mind as well, to question whether your drive towards perfection is really one that you have chosen for yourself. Is it really the path that you want to walk? Because it is a tough path, because it takes lots of energy and effort to get things as good as they can be. So I think these are the main points. And I think perfectionism is also can be often associated with a condition called codependency. So codependent people, they want to be perfect because they might want to, be helpful to other people. With codependency, obviously, you don't want to be rejected. You don't want to be seen as a bad person. So for people with codependency, being good is a definition of being perfect, for example. So codependency can also have, other symptoms like, kind of being stuck in bad relationships, struggling to say no, or kind of not being able to move forward in life because we have these high expectations for ourselves. We have to be perfect. We have to be this good person. So if you do struggle with codependency, I have a new group coaching program that is going live in September. I still have a couple spots left. So as a result of this program, you're going to get great clarity on who you are as a person. You're going to develop skills of saying no without feeling guilty. And most importantly, it will help you to define what is selfish, what is not selfish, so that you can stop pleasing other people. And I think people pleasing is huge for people with codependency or perfectionism. So if you do want to sign up, there are still a couple spots left. There's a link in the comment section just underneath the video. So if you're not sure the coaching is right for you, I do offer free 20 minutes consultation, so you can just get in touch on my website. Okay, so if there's anything, do you guys have any other questions? I'll be happy to answer them. I'm just going to go through the comment box. So if you do have any more comments or questions, I'm here. So what does appreciation mean? Max asks. So appreciation is, let's say I'm looking at this glass of water, right? It's just a glass of water. And I could say it's not perfect because it's it got a little bit warm, right? So it's not really that good, but it's still a glass of water, and I really appreciate that I have it on my desk because it's really hot here. So appreciation is all about noticing how something is good for you, how something, maybe in a sense, performs its function, so that you gain something from it. It's simply something that is good for you. Is emotional sponging natural for certain people, as for example INFJs? So emotional sponging, I understand it's to do with empathy. So, you know, obviously the stronger your empathy, the more feelings and emotions of other people you're going to start picking up. The more feelings you're going to start picking up, the more kind of, you know, emotionally crowded you're going to start feeling inside. So it kind of links to empathy. But I'm not sure if it's, yeah, it's probably natural for certain people. INFJs, probably. But having said that, I met INFJs in the past that are not very high on empathy. So I think it's very subjective. But it has to do with emotional intelligence and empathy. So it's going to be natural for certain people, but at the same time, I think you can improve your emotional intelligence and empathy also. I'm pretty sure there's some books. Baron says, healthy perfectionism is about pleasing oneself, but that can also lead to too much self-involvement. I would say with healthy perfectionism is, yeah, it's obviously you start appreciating things, or you enjoy the process, or, you know, you start feeling good about yourself because you accomplished something. But at the same time, it's also about having this healthy detachment from what you do. So the process you're engaged in, let's say I write an article, right? I write that article and I'm focused on the process itself, and then I appreciate, okay, I wrote an article, it got maybe like 2 likes, which is not that great. But then I appreciate, okay, I got some people read it, right? It's good enough. It performs the function, it helped me to express myself, right? But if I'm gonna start thinking about it like, oh great, I got 2 likes, yeah, that's moving you a little bit towards the narcissistic end of the spectrum, right? If I keep obsessing about something being, you know, excellent or pleasant. So it's more about kind of having this, you know, more balanced point of view. Yeah, that's a good point, but it's still a glass of water. So it's still an article, it's still, you know, 2 likes, it's still something, appreciation. And all right, guys, so I think I covered most of the things. Again, if you do want to join the new Aspire Coaching Group program, there's a link in the description. And if you want to support my work, you can become a patron. Again, link in the description. And I've recently launched a new feature on Patreon, which when you become a patron, you join a specific tier, you then get automatically an Aspire Group coaching membership. So that gives you an access to an Aspire Group community on Discord. So if you want to check that out, I invite you to do that. So again, thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you for connecting. It's been great reading all your ideas. I'm sorry if I couldn't read every single comment. I'll do it after the live stream, just so many of them. So I hope to see you again next time. And again, take care of yourself, and thank you for watching.